Hey, what's up? I'm Al Cox. I make games, play games, and everything in between. And today we're going to be talking about a big lawsuit that came out of France and what it could mean for the hyper-casual industry. Voodoo, probably the biggest, most well-known publisher out there, just won a lawsuit against Rollic Games, who was recently purchased by Zynga. And the lawsuit was actually over a specific update they did. This should be really interesting in how it plays out. And let's take a look at some of those articles. So from Financial Times, we got Voodoo wins a court case against Zynga-owned rival. Pocket Gamer Biz, we got Voodoo sues Rollic over plagiarism in hyper-casual titled Workshop. GameIndustry.biz, Voodoo wins plagiarism lawsuit against Zynga-owned Rollic Games. Hyper-casual developer Voodoo wins copycat case against Zynga Rollic Games. So we got a bunch of these articles coming out. Voodoo wins landmark case against Rollic Games. Voodoo wins a court case against studio and publisher copy mechanics of word turning. Alright, well, actually, Game World Observer, I don't think this is correct at all. This language is really bad. So cloning is a problem in the hyper-casual industry. Fun fact, you probably don't know this, but I am a human clone. I have somebody out there with the same genetic code as me. He's not pretending to be me. There's only one Al Cox, but he does a really good job, and he's a clone. So hyper-casual games and cloning is a big problem because how laws define game mechanics. Another industry that is similar to the game industry in terms of intellectual property is fashion. A really good example of this is if you ever go shopping at H&M or Zara or all these literally knockoff designer clothing companies. You take a well-named brand like Gucci, they'll make some fancy cork shoes, and then H&M will come and literally duplicate that shoe with cheaper corks and put it out all over the globe. It's very similar, and there's many reasons for this, but the primary reason is to drive innovation. Okay, you take a platformer like Mario Brothers, maybe one of the first of its kind, but kind of. You see, it gets complicated. And the ability to jump, to stomp on enemies, to go through finish lines. Like, these are used in all platformers and the game mechanics, and they cannot be, you cannot have an IP on that. You cannot say, I am the only one who can have a character jump on enemies and hit boxes with question marks. You can't do that. Let's take a look at Financial Times. It's probably the most credible source out there, and we'll take a look at Pocket Gamer Biz to just review. At the same time, I played the first 10 levels of Word Turning 3D and Workshop. I'll even show those on the screen while I go through the article so that you can actually have a visual representation of the games being discussed. Financial Times. Voodoo wins court case against Zynga-owned rival. Clash with publisher Rollic and developer Hero comes as competition grows in the hyper-casual gaming sector. Voodoo, the French mobile game maker, has won lengthy court battle against a prominent hyper-casual gaming rival and its publisher after it alleged that the pair had copied key elements of its carpentry game Word Turning. Voodoo's clash with Istanbul-based publisher Rollic Games, which was acquired by Zynga for 168 million last month, and a developer Hero Games began in January when the two released an update to Workshop, a free-to-play game that allows players to whittle objects out of virtual pieces of wood. And it's not just Workshop, also uses metal and other objects, but I don't know if this person actually played the game. So Voodoo, the French company, are Americans. So funny. Okay, so Voodoo contended that new features including polishing and painting stage and the use of real-world objects rather than abstract shapes were characteristic elements taken from Word Turning, which centers on a similar premise. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of that is a stretch because you can't copyright game mechanic of turning wood real pieces, but their lawsuit is focused on the update of the game. So So I think that is ridiculously the most important piece of this lawsuit, is it's not the game, it's the update to the game. The judgment marks the intensification of competition in the hyper-casual gaming industry, a rapidly evolving sector characterized by cheaply produced, quick-to-play games which lead the download chart. Okay, yeah, I guess, I don't know about cheaply produced, but I guess that's debatable. We're super excited at the outcome, said Alexander Shea, lead publishing at Voodoo. The decision of the court sets a precedent, especially for hyper-casual games. Does it though? Like that's what I'm curious about. Does it set a precedent? Maybe. It might set a precedent in the EU, not counting Britain these days. Sorry, UK. Maybe. It definitely sets some precedent, some kind of precedent. I honestly think the US courts would probably ignore it because in the US, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Big company against a big company, but there is definitely some precedent set specific to updates on games that have similar mechanics, that update their game mechanics to include what has been used in other games. It's a specific precedent. It could be important in the future. And I actually looked it up. The lawyer for Voodoo, who has gotten the New York Bar Association, would know the legality of how the laws work in the US. Most laws in all developed countries is all based on precedent. So this sets a precedent specific to updates in a game mechanic. Like, it's difficult. You know, if you're a lawyer, you're getting paid 6 figures, you could argue this better than some dude on YouTube, and you're better. So let's get back. In contrast to lengthy development time and extensive testing of traditional gaming, hyper-casual games can be made within a matter of weeks because it's out in the public forum from a very early stage. There's high visibility and games are easily copied, according to Nassim Amelia. Oh yeah, so she's the legal counsel. That just sounds like legalese for, hey, it's very easy to copy a game. But again, game mechanics, you can copy that all day long and have no problem. I mean, you could get sued, but game mechanics are copyable. You can copy game mechanics. That's just always the way. Okay, Chinese internet group Tencent last month took a stake in Voodoo, which gave the French company a valuation of $1.4 billion, making it the first unicorn in the sector. I'm not gonna get into that. I don't want to talk about the Chinese right now. I think hopefully this doesn't hurt Voodoo in the future. It's only a minority stake, so it's not that big of a deal, but you don't know. China's planning to take over the world. They're starting with Africa, unfortunately. But the big thing is, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. I think they're just mentioning this for the money factor. When billions of dollars get mentioned, people begin to pay attention. Hyper-casual game is still maturing, said Stephanie Kurgan, a VC partner at Index Ventures and former chief operating officer at King Digital Entertainment. Important fact, King Digital, maker of Candy Crush and Saga, they tried to copyright King and Saga, like the words in the game, and Candy. If I had a game called Candy Game, they would sue me. So this kind of gets you and brings you into the world of big publisher, big money, lots of lawsuit, and let's see what happens. The long term in the US is that Candy Crush Saga lost the court rule to use. It was a ridiculous legal battle in which they just had money to give to lawyers and go to court and to hurt small time developers. I think Voodoo is going to court to try to help. It wants all its developers to know that it'll go to court for them and it'll spend money and win these lawsuits. And you know, time will tell how this lawsuit and the precedent that it sets, if it will mean anything or if it will mean a lot. Because once you have a little precedent, you get a little bit more and a little bit more and it becomes a snowball effect. But again, this is specific to France and probably the EU. After a takedown notice failed, failed, Voodoo brought the matter of alleged plagiarism to a Paris court, which this month ruled in its favor. It ordered Rollic and Hero Games to pay $125K in economic reputational damage for unfair competition and plagiarism. I suspect that money, which is literally nothing, I mean it's not nothing, but I bet that's just lawyer fees. And let's be real, Voodoo is in Paris, and Paris is actually one of the biggest places, you know, Istanbul, when it comes to hyper-casual games. There's definitely a industry being built, so it will stop any developers in the EU who have like companies and they're chucking out clones, quote unquote, copycats. This will definitely deter anybody in France for sure. As somebody who travels the world all the time, I know for a fact different countries have different laws, and different laws in some countries don't apply in other countries, and I see this on the day to day. And so I keep stressing this because the most important court is the US court, because the US App Store makes the most money. You want to get ranked on the US App Store, not necessarily the French App Store. Yes, you want to get ranked on the French App Store, but you get featured in the US, payday. You get featured in the UK, you know, small payday. It's still good payday, but like not like the US. However, financial reward had not been the most important outcome for Voodoo. Yeah, that makes sense. Miss Amélie Geoffroy, je ne parle pas en français. For us, it's important to have legal precedent, of course. See, their case was only to make one precedent, which is towards an update, okay? Rollic and Hero Games were also ordered to remove Woodshop from the Google and Apple stores, and will have to publish an announcement of the judgment in 3 newspapers of magazines of Voodoo's choice. That's not even really true, honestly. That is specific. Maybe that's for France, but I downloaded both of the games the other day after this judgment came out from the US stores. It's still there now, and it has all those features. The Parisian court can't do anything about that. Specific to France and maybe the EU, but I had someone check the Paris store and it's still there. So if it has the ability to copy and paint, and the way Woodshop does it is not even the way, like that's my kind of issue, is the way they do it is different. But let me just finish reading this story. 99% of studios absolutely hate clones. Who likes clones? Who's that 1%? Nobody likes clones. Oh, you know, people clone to try to make money. People clone for practice. Yeah, I agree. Nobody likes clones. But as a human clone, I think it is ridiculously super important to define mechanic. The foundation of the legal principle is it is okay to clone mechanics. That isn't going anywhere. And I think there is more potential in the development of being able to clone game mechanics. And that does not mean I think cloning games is okay. I just think that the benefit to society and gamers of allowing game mechanics to easily be cloned all over the place is more beneficial than the monetary issues that come from cloned games. Hyper-casual industry is plagued by clone games, but I guess it's right now in 2020, it's difficult for me to see that going away. Mr. Shea added, Voodoo is proactively taking operational measures to beat would-be clones. We invest heavily into a game that is being copied so that the roadmap is quicker and so that the original is always better than its copy. 100%. The Word Turning 3D game by Voodoo is 100 times better than the Word Turning game by Rollic. The game by Rollic, you literally just it's for a child, like a 9-year-old child or something. I'm not a good, I have no idea when it comes to kids. Voodoo game is more extensive, well thought out, built, and more of a complete game than Rollic's game. As someone who's played the first 10 levels of each, hands down for sure. And then it ends, Rollic and Hero Games declined to comment. I don't think they need to comment. And then we got Pocket Gamer. Voodoo sues Rollic over plagiarism in hyper-casual title. Voodoo wins plagiarism plagiarism lawsuit against one of these articles had examples of other quote-unquote copies, and I was just gonna kind of argue. Okay, so here we go. This is a good example, and I actually really like this example. If you use Unity or Buildbox, I think this is a good example that, to me, it's not a clone. It's like a clone, but it's not a clone. And again, I say this as an identical twin. Now, this game, Snow Patrol, this was published by Voodoo, and this game actually looks really great, really fun. And if you know anything about Buildbox, I think sometimes people look at Buildbox as like a cloning game engine, and that's 100% fair. But if you know how to use it, then you can literally create your own twist. So in this game, you can see where they collect balls, and this has actually evolved a lot since the original. I can just tell from the way it looks. This is a different screenshot than I remember. But look at this, Picker 3D. Same thing, but this is gonna be crazy. These things right here, that makes it almost a completely different game. It's like adding an element that those little helicopter features, that little piece completely changes the game mechanic, and you could even argue makes it a brand new game. You can, and lawyers will argue that shit because that's what they're gonna get paid to do. I am super curious to see what more lawsuits come out. I do believe that Voodoo will probably continue to do lawsuits in the Parisian courts and try to build up more precedent to help stop clones, but in reality, I don't really think it's gonna do too much because, yeah, it's really, I don't know how to say this, but it's really easy to kind of change a game mechanic or a game idea, add a different element, and make it a brand new game. And so eventually the courts are going to have to decide, is it a clone or is it something original? And it's, you know, having that be decided by judges and cases by lawyers is a complicated mess. Some people that clone out there, they don't care about the Parisian courts. I think in the short term, it'll stop a lot of cloners from cloning Voodoo games, but also it could just stop cloners from cloning Voodoo games and then publishing in the US. Biggest market there is making it to the top charts is the US App Store. It's not the EU, it's not Asia. So until there's like a case like this in the US, we'll have to see. Any US cases, they may use that as precedent. But the biggest factor, I think, is Voodoo's legal counsel does understand the US law system, at least in the state of New York. So I think that's the biggest thing going for them in the long term. And they'll probably try to build up multiple of these cases in the future. But again, the case is for an update of the game. It's not the game itself. And these specific wordings may not seem important, but they are the most important piece because it's a lawsuit. In a lawsuit, it's all about how you word things. I would love to know your thoughts on what this means for the hyper-casual market, because these are my thoughts and I've heard other people discuss it and it's all across the board. So I guess I'm curious, you know, what your thoughts are and where you're from, and if you think of what I'm saying when it comes to the US in terms of money, courts, and lawsuits, if that'll be impacted by this French case or not. Let me know your thoughts. I'm super curious because yeah, after this there's probably only gonna be more lawsuits, not only from Voodoo but from any publisher that's got the money to afford it. And this also helps highlight to any developers that you want to work with Voodoo, because they'll go to court for you, and yeah, that's a nice feeling. So until next time, stay safe out there, wear a mask if you can, and my pro tip is I do a drop of lavender in the mask and then everything smells like lavender. I gotta go. Peace.